Hi everyone, look at this gorgeous cling film effect. All it is yellow watercolour paint and some cling film from the kitchen just popped on randomly, and you just left to dry, of course. Leave it, it does take a little while to dry, and then you get these beautiful effects which can render rocks or other subjects. But now I'm using a coloured pastel pencil just to pop in just basic shapes of the rocks here. I don't normally use a pencil, I normally use pastel pencil because it rubs out, I find, whereas other coloured pencils I find them hard to rub out. Sometimes I use Inktense pencil, but I find that this is a forgiving pencil. Pastel pencils. Now this is oil pastel I'm using it on its side, and this will create lovely textures for the rocks, and of course it will resist the paint, which is what I really want, because it's all about texture with this, and cling film is great for rendering texture. This is a different paper I ordered. I actually bought it by accident. So it's a block of watercolour paint, Saunders Waterford, 300 grams. I'm not sure how it's going to react. It's only 300 grams, so it may cockle because I do tend to paint quite wet. Here's some trigger spray over the complete surface of the paper. And this is a little spray bottle with a reel in, watercolour in, very diluted. I want to warm up the paper. I'm putting it predominantly in the foreground, and as I said, it will resist the paint, the oil pastel. Now I'm doing the same with the red. And later on I'll be finishing with soft pastels, which are very different to oil pastels. That the soft pastel does resist paint, but not in the same way as the oil pastel. Try it with a hairdryer, it'll take about 5 minutes. And then I've put the trigger spray on again of the clean water, and here I've got a reel in watercolour paint. So I'll just turn the paper upside down because I want it to trickle from what was the foreground, but now I've turned it upside down. The foreground is at the top, so it's quite a thick consistency because the rocks are quite solid, and I didn't want it to be too diluted for that reason. But it's not flowing, I'm finding, so I will have to add some more water, some more trigger spray here, because I want it to start to flow. I want the paint to flow, so I'm randomly just popping the paint in. I can see it running now, it's starting to flow. It is very yellow, but I always mix most times mix my paints on the paper because they give lovely fresh atmospheric results. So I'm just popping in a bit up here randomly, and in the distant rocks, and then I'll dilute it now further for the distance, for the sea, for the waves in this little demo. I'm turning it back the right way up now, giving it a little tilt here and there for this little demonstration. Pop in a bit of pigment for the rock pools, but I'll leave this foreground one, I think. That's the light shining on it, so that can remain as it is. I'm going to turn it upside down again and add cerulean blue, which is a great colour for granulating. So again, it's completely obliterating the underneath layer of watercolour, so I'm going to add some water bit of spattering. It's beginning to granulate in the distance, which is beautiful. Creating a bit of atmosphere. And the oil pastel resisting the paint nicely. Going to pop in a few waves here. In the distance. Now I'm going to add some indigo watercolour. Again, it's a little bit too thick. Now it's about its consistency of semi-skimmed milk, I like to say. So I'm putting it in the darkest areas, the shadow areas, pulling the handle down to make the reflections you saw, and tilting the board again, letting the paint flow. It looks very dark at this stage, but it will dry lighter, and I'm going to finish, as I say, with these soft pastels over the top. So just laying the cling film on predominantly in the foreground. Now I've left it a long time, a few hours to dry. Sometimes it takes, depending on how wet the paper is. Look at those beautiful effects that the cling film has created. Now this is soft pastel I'm using. I'm using it to render the lightest areas of the rocks where the sun's catching the lightest parts of the rocks, predominantly in the foreground again. A little bit of green, light green pastel, and this is a nice olive mid-green soft pastel as well. I'm using the tip of it now and blending it with my finger here and there, which is what you can do to create lovely soft effects with soft pastels. Now I'm using the darkest tone of the greens, using the tip to render, to define the edges of the rocks more. Just finishing off now. Well, I hope I'm inspiring you to have a go with Clingfilm. I don't want to do too much more, else I'll obliterate the effects that we created with the Clingfilm. So a little bit of oil pastel in there. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.